righty, well, welcome everybody. On behalf of Jewish Family Service, I would like to welcome you to Navigating Without a Map, Part 3, a webinar for parents. Specifically, we're going to try and focus tonight on parents of teenagers in the face of COVID and returning to school this fall. My name is Lelach Rave. I'm a pediatrician, and I'll be moderating this evening. And I am so lucky to have with me Doctors Aisha Reuler and Dr. Lena Neufeld, who are both going to be contributing their wisdom tonight. And we also have Cindy Brown, our Asl Interpreter from the Hearing, Speech, and Deaf Center in Seattle. If you use ASL, please pin Cindy's video for your screen so you can see her throughout our discussion this evening. And please also, for everyone, take a moment to read in the chat box. There's some housekeeping items there that our JFS staff have posted. If you have trouble finding the chat, it's at the bottom of the screen. There's a chat button, and you can click on that and the chat will open. And also, anytime during the event, feel free to use the Q&A button to ask any questions that you might have. We're going to start tonight with questions that were posed before this evening, but we will try to get to everything in the Q&A window, so feel free to add whatever it is will make this evening most meaningful for you. So we're going to start with some introductions. Aisha, do you want to just say a few words about yourself?
Sure. My name's Aisha Reuler. I'm a pediatrician at the Polyclinic and General Pediatrics. I am the mother of 3 kids, not quite teenagers yet. So they're 11 and 7 and 4, and they keep me very busy, as does this fun practice. But I get to spend a lot of time with young people of all ages, and it brings me a lot of joy. And so, but I'm there with everyone as we navigate these choppy waters coming up. So I just look forward to chatting with you kind of today.
Thanks so much, Aisha. Lena, why don't you say a few words about yourself too?
Yeah, welcome. My name is Lena Neufeld, and I'm a psychologist, and my specialty is working with teens and young adults. I am the teen and young adult therapist at JFS, and just so everyone knows, we do have availability for our counseling services. So a little plug that if you enjoy tonight and if you would like to continue the conversation, I'm available to work with your kids, as well as recently adding in parent coaching. So that would very much be continuing the conversation. I've worked with teens and young adults for over 10 years in many settings, including wilderness therapy, residential treatment, inpatient treatment, and outpatient. And it is an age group that I simply adore. It's always exciting. You never know what to expect. And it really keeps me on my toes in a positive way. So I'm very much looking forward to chatting with you all tonight about this age group and what lies ahead.
Great, thank you. And as many folks, if anyone has attended these previous webinars, you all know that in addition to being a primary care pediatrician, I am also a mom to a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 9-year-old. And I will share with you as we get started that my 16-year-old's advice to me about tonight was let them know that your house is a wreck, that your children are up all night, at late hours watching movies, that their nutrition maybe has kind of gone into the basket over the summer, and that you actually don't have a map either. And I was like, well, that's, I think, the whole point of the title, Navigating Without a Map. And he turned to me and said, but Mom, they're tuning in because they think you have a semblance of a map. And so let's be really honest right at the beginning, we don't have the map either. We are all building this plane as we are flying it. And our hope is that we can help, just because we are all seeing so many families navigating these new waters, that we can share some of the wisdom that maybe we have gleaned by having not just our own children and our own chaotic lives that we're trying to keep afloat, but we're also watching as many other families do the same. And hopefully that can ease or at least normalize everyone's journeys as we go along. So that's the plug from my teenager. So let's start, since school is beginning, with some general thoughts about distance and hybrid learning, because many of our children are not going to be beginning school in ways that they ever have before. And Lena, can you maybe lead us off here a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of related to what your son brought up with you this morning, I adore that. That's pretty sophisticated. But the gist of it, I really can't agree with more. This is not a situation that any of us have planned for, and it sucks. It's not optimal. No one wants to be in it. We don't want to be in it. Our kids don't want to be in this. Our teachers don't want to be. We'd all so much rather be in person and be continuing the life that we were living before this. So recognizing that it is hard for everyone, and we're all just trying to make it work. So I think one of the most important things that you can do with your children or the young folks in your life is validate their experience. There's a temptation to kind of try to find a silver lining or reframe and look for positives. And I think that there is a place for that, but it is so important before any of that type of conversation to acknowledge that it sucks. If you don't do this, it's really hard to then make a plug for another avenue of thinking or another perspective. It makes such a difference when you're able to say to the young person that you're talking with or trying to connect to be like, this really is the worst. I know that you do not want to be with me all day at home. You want to be with your friends. The teenage years are all about individuating from your family and learning what it's like to sort of be independent for the first time and make friends. So the premise of learning from home really runs up against that developmental phase. And so I would stay so far away from the look on the bright side or have you thought about it like this, and really go for, I know this is so hard. This must be so challenging. Is there anything I can do to help make this a little bit better? That initial part of validating their experience is going to be the only real way to then move into any other type of conversation in which you're trying to enact change. You first want to show them that you see where they're at, that you know how hard this is, and only then do you create that rapport that you can maybe bring in some new elements of change.
Thanks. Aisha?
Yeah, no, I think that is such an important reminder and a great first step. Acknowledging your children and how they're feeling and how they must be feeling, and that you are feeling a lot of the same stuff too, and that it doesn't feel good, and that it's different, and different is hard. I think that a bit of validation really does, like you said, set the tone for your ability to kind of even use any of the strategies or to cope with the difficulty. That is such an important point. And then, you know, once you've been able to make it clear that you're in this with them, and that you acknowledge how tough it is for them, and how you know, their perspective and their loss and what they were hopeful for matters to you, even though it might not be the same type of loss that you're feeling, or the same type of disappointment, or the same suckiness for the same reasons. that you get it, you appreciate it, and then you can, we hope that we can try to model some of the things you hope they can take out of this, or that they can use to cope with this. And some things that are going to be really important for us as parents, and for educators, for really everyone, because we're all in this. But what's going to be important is to be able to be flexible. You've probably heard this a lot, as we're all talking about what's going on in this pandemic and how it affects every facet of life. And it's really true, though. I mean, if you're stuck in the hopes and the expectations of what things used to be, or what you hope them to be, then it really is hard to move forward. So important to acknowledge it, and then try to instill and demonstrate adaptability, to everything that's being thrown at us. If they can see us hearing news about what's happening with school this week, because it seems like it does change every week, or what the new rules are for protecting each other and ourselves, and that we make the adjustments. And man, that stinks. Now I can't be, I have to be 6 feet from my friends now, and if I'm not, then I have to be wearing a mask. That's no fun. That's not the way you want to connect. But if we can model to them and really tell them about the importance of trying to make those changes and adapt with them so that they can push through, that's and being flexible in that is really, I think, what I hope to instill in my kids, and what I hope to try to do myself, because it is hard to do it. But I think it's the only way to make it through without really kind of falling apart. It's just a good way to cope. And then I think expectations are another thing that we really have to shift a little bit, and really on all fronts again. So, as I think Lelach said in the beginning, no one's started school like this. Even if you're doing some portion of in-person school, it's very different. You're probably wearing a mask, and it's just really different. So if we can try to manage our expectations, for what it means to go to school, for what it means to be successful at school, so that you can be open and leave room for the challenges that might come up, and just kind of expect them to happen. Just expect it to be all over the place, and to be kind of changing really regularly, because that's what's happening. And I think that helps too. Another modeling thing, if we can manage our own expectations of our kids, then and for ourselves, and for how things are going to go, then I think it really can, again, allow you to cope with what we have just acknowledged is pretty crappy.
All right, thanks both of you guys. That's a great way to start us off. I do want to pull in a specific question that came in, which I think pertains to this completely. We had someone ask specifically about kids who are starting a new school. So kids who are just entering middle school, or perhaps just entering high school. And as I think about it, we can extend that to kids who are perhaps starting at a new school. Aisha, can you talk to us a little bit about the idea of new beginnings in this crazy time?
Yes. I have one transitioning to middle school. My 11-year-old's going to be a 6th grader. There's so much excitement about that. There has been, and that really still is, although it's very different. It is kind of helpful, I think, to think of it as everyone's having this new beginning. Yes, I think we all get a little bit of a pang thinking about kindergartners starting this, this new experience so differently in middle school and high school freshmen. I mean, it's all these big milestones that, kind of I thought of in a very specific way, just being so different, I think. So one way to also kind of help, I think, is to kind of remember that everybody's doing this. Like we've said, everyone's doing this in this together, and we're all doing it really differently than we ever have. So it is new for everybody, and nobody, this isn't normal, so nobody's going to be a natural at it. So you don't need to feel like anyone's got it down any better than you do. This is a new beginning for everybody. So, you know, that's something that that's what I try to tell my son too. You know, it's really hard to have a new start in such a different way that you can't even predict or plan or ahead for, really. But everyone's kind of doing that. But it is a good opportunity to check in with your child who is transitioning to, you know, some seventh graders had an experience, at least in their school, using Zoom or whatever they use to work at school, and so they have a little bit of context. It is really different, completely different from anything they've had when they're transitioning to a whole nother grade level. So I think kind of keeping your child as informed as you can with what little we know, and seeing what questions they have and how you might be able to make it easier for them is a way that can kind of soften the blow to a completely different, double new beginning.
Wonderful. I think one of the things that I've also been sharing with kids and is also powerful is just knowing that it's new for the teachers too.
Yeah, the teachers.
Look at them as authority figures. And they've never done this before either. They've never started a school year like this. And parents have never started a school year like this. So I think just in expanding that idea that it is an equalizer, that we're all in new territory, can be really helpful.
I think another thing that can be really empowering in this situation where you feel like you have no control for a new sixth grader, for example, or high schooler, would be to try to find something that you can control and maybe try to be successful at, because there's so much disappointment. So to be able to pick a goal. So if you have a child who struggles with timeliness, then maybe their goal, you know, they're going to be having virtual classes that start at a certain time. Maybe their goal is going to be that they show up right on time for all their classes most days of the week. Or if a child is less likely to speak up in class, maybe they challenge themselves to write at least one chat, write in the chat at least once in the day, or getting more exercise, giving them something that they can try to work towards, that you can predict is going to be necessary, or that, you know, is going to be an opportunity to work towards, and then hopefully being successful at it, so that in this such a confusing, and you feel like you're really at the mercy of all the adults and this virus, you know, to have something that you can kind of control and be successful at it I think can also be really empowering.
Fabulous. Lena, can you add on to that, especially thinking that it's not just a day or a week, but we're going to be doing this for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that, Aisha, when you were speaking just now, that came to my mind was thinking about how this is a lot more independence than our young people are used to, middle schoolers, high schoolers, right? Typically, they're getting dropped off at school in some form or another, and then they're kind of following the pack throughout the day, and kind of doing what everyone else does, and can look to their left or to the right to sort of figure out, am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? What's everyone else doing in the room? Oh, they're grabbing a book. I can grab the book, right? And so a huge shift is that you're alone, and so you don't have all these other people to look towards in a very literal sense for guidance throughout the day. It's a lot more independence and autonomy than is typically given to this age group. Usually that comes in college, right? Where you're suddenly, oh my God, I have to like figure out where my class is for the first time and figure out how to feed myself and where's the dining hall. That comes later. And so all of a sudden, we're asking our young folks to be a lot more independent. And so remembering that, I think, is huge. And so an expectation that we might not register as independent, such as knowing your schedule, and do you have all the Zoom links? Do you understand how your teacher is conducting class? Do you understand, do you know how to check to see if your internet's working? And if it's not, or you can't turn your camera on, do you know who to turn to ask for help? And I think that that's a really big part of it. We kind of assume like, oh, well, now they're working from home, here's the computer, go do it. But they're typically following their peers and doing what everyone else is doing, and that's helping them buoy themselves through the day, and they don't have that. So really stepping back and realizing, whoa, this is a lot more independence than they're used to, and they can't just follow what everyone else is doing. And so even though you'll probably be met with a lot of resistance if you are inquiring about, do we know what the day looks like? Do you have your schedule? Like, do you know, how to click into chat rooms or how to access assignments or what your teachers are assigning? Even though you will probably be met with, yes, I know, get out of my face, everything sucks. They're still going to have heard it and know that if they are confused, they can come back and ask, and maybe it'll be later that day or next week and be like, I actually am a little confused about how something works. So even if the initial asking about the sort of basic mechanics of the schedule and how the school is working, even if that's met with the sort of like talk to the hand, though that's a little dated, it's still planted there. They still heard that you were curious about that, and they still now know, okay, I can go and ask them if I am confused about that. That's a reasonable thing I might be confused about.
Yeah, to piggyback on one of your thoughts there, Lena, in addition to having the guideposts of other kids in their classroom, when we look at the bigger construct of middle school or high school, often those young kids that are just younger students who are just starting also have the older students to look to. So even if they're not necessarily doing X, Y, or Z yet, they have examples of, oh, this is how it looks as I get to be an older teenager. These are some behaviors or, habits or things that they can model. And when you're by yourself in your basement starting high school, you can't model off of anyone. You don't have those older examples. And I think that's a powerful loss.
Something that you said that made me think.
So I don't know.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, Lena, you made me think about when you were discussing, that noise isn't too loud. You were discussing all the things that might come up on the day, like the questions that might come up from your learner, your child. My niece is started in Arizona. They started their virtual school a few weeks ago now. It's probably been a month, and my sister-in-law's advice to me was just for me to clear my schedule if I can. It's not gonna, you're not gonna be able to necessarily do it, but if possible, there's gonna be a lot that potentially can come up. And if you can make yourself available, and it's a luxury, I know, but if you can make yourself available in those days to be able to help with the troubleshooting and show that little extra support to your child, if possible, that could be a little added touch benefit.
Yeah, and if you have more than one caretaker or parent in the household, I think it can be really helpful to break the day up. And so kind of have it be, okay, this parent is covering the morning hours, and this is the parent you go to with questions in the morning, and then switch it. And if you're lucky enough, this other parent is going to be who takes questions and fields questions in the afternoon. And you can obviously get creative with that, but acknowledging that it's nice for the parent to be able to have chunks of time where they can work, and acknowledge that there could be questions throughout the day. So ahead of time, kind of planning within your household, questions are going to come up. Who do I go to? And having that mapped out a little bit, so it's not at that moment that everyone's busy, no one can help, the internet's not working and all things are boiling down. You kind of have some plans in place for when those questions do come up.
Absolutely. Fabulous. Let's let's shift a little bit to not just the academic logistics, which are huge, but also some of the social logistics, because as much as we want to support our children succeeding with the academics of school, there's a lot of questions and a lot of issues around the social and emotional health of our kids. And as we continue to talk about this, for anyone who is on as a participant, if any of this is sparking questions for you, the Q&A box is there, so please feel free to add them in, because we are, like I said, are going based on some questions that came to us beforehand, but we are very happy to also address anything that comes up for folks as they're listening. So, Lena, you mentioned earlier, a huge part of the teenage years is individuation, independence. Their role in life during these teen years is to get as far away from us as possible, physically, emotionally, socially, and the peer group really becomes the new hub, the new home, and it's really hard to do right now. And
Yeah.
so I don't know if either of you want to jump on that first, but in terms of helping our teenagers continue the process that we want them to go through, this is the one job where we try and put ourselves out of business, right? Like as parents, our job is that our kids can launch and be okay without us. So how do we help support that in a time when they are stuck with us?
Yeah. This is tough. This is super tough. I go back to the validation piece and being sure to find ways where you can really affirm that this feels bad, and it feels bad for a lot of reasons, and hormonally, and what's going on with your body is one of them. Encouraging at the same time, like you said, it has to happen, and it's gonna happen, and it's sort of a matter of how can we make it as safe as possible. So similar to the scheduling, I think that if you're able to kind of plan ahead in the week and think about things that are goals, and maybe they happen and maybe they don't, but things outside of school. So some things that are just going to be for fun, some ways to get outside and ways to see friends, and kind of plan ahead for that. And using the planning, you can think about, okay, how can we do this safely? And, pre-COVID, I might have had the advice along the lines of, your kids are going to be going to parties, and the safest way to have your kid go to a party is go to a party at your house. And it still kind of holds, right? Because if you're in a position, or you have the privilege of having some sort of outdoor space, at least right now in the fall, while it's still nice, you have a yard, a porch, a stoop, but a place where you can kind of supervise and set the expectations, but still be encouraging some sort of hangout social time. I think that's a great way to go about it. And in doing so, it's just about really having clear communication about if you're making rules or setting expectations, that you have a clear explanation of why you're doing it. So it's never like, I don't get why do we have to be hanging out in front of you, or why do we have to be limited to the porch? You're able to say, like, this is what's going on right now, and if I see you, I know that you are able to see your friends, but you're doing it safely, you're outside, and I feel really comfortable letting you and having you be able to have this social experience, even though this is a more dangerous time to be socializing. And so having a clear script in your head about explanations kind of backing up why you want to have the party at your house and in this sort of small area outside with just more limitations, I guess is what I'm getting at. So those are some thoughts on it.
Aisha, what would you want to add to that?
Yeah, when you were talking, I was thinking about the strategy I sometimes will encourage some of my teenage patients to use if they're trying to avoid drinking or smoking, or they really don't want to engage in those things that their peers were doing. Essentially, I tell them to practice in their head what they're going to say when that comes up, so that you're not on the spot, and so that you can kind of support your argument a little bit better. Like, oh yeah, I'm not into that, or even if it's simple, just so you sound like you mean it when you say it. So kind of similarly, I think it's important to as parents to kind of assess, okay, what am I comfortable with, and what can I offer that is maybe a little bit of a give, and acknowledging that they need this right now. And I think that's really powerful for them to see that you are considering them and validating them and what they need, and and I think, hopefully they will understand that, as you mentioned, there are parts of it that you just need to see done a certain way, but that's the compromise there. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to kind of to have a little bit of more comfort for yourself, in that but then still allow them to get the socializing that we know that they need. And I think a lot of us are glad that they have technology that they can use to connect with each other, and get some kind of FaceTime. But there really isn't anything that can completely replace the face-to-face interactions that they have with each other. And so if we can find a way to allow that safely and acknowledge to them, again, that we know that they need it, I think it makes it a little bit less tense for everybody.
And I think the word safely there is one that we kind of put in air quotes.
Right.
Because we know that there are no guarantees. We know that there is nothing that's going to be 100%. And yet we also know that it's really important for them to have those experiences. And it's also really important for them to feel trusted. And so the parallel that comes to my mind, because it's another parallel that we're negotiating, I have a kiddo who's doing the driving thing, and talk about something that potentially is really dangerous, and yet we trust kids. Whoa, the driving thing. And we drive with him, and we try and impart our wisdom, and we try and help them be safe. And at the end of the day, most of us end up trusting our teens to get behind the wheel and go. And, do we know 100% that they're going to leave the phone, in the back seat, and they're going to fasten their seatbelt and everything? No. But at some point we say, okay, we've given you the information, you know why this is important, and we're going to trust you. And I think similarly with socializing, these teenagers get it. They're hearing all these messages from us, from the media, everywhere. They know that we're in the middle of a pandemic. They know what the rules are to be as safe as you can. And then we get to trust. And I think it's important for our relationship with them to trust. And it's also really important as we, as parents, think about how much are we going to trust, where do we trust, how do we trust, to recognize that we do it in other realms. Like, we all sort of expect our teenagers are going to get their driver's licenses during their teenage years, and there's lots of dangers there. So we have practice, we do this, and those skills can be kind of transferred into the realm of COVID safety.
I love that. I thought that is so powerful. I think that it's such an amazing gift that you can give your kids when you do trust them, and you do say, in spite of our anxieties and our neuroses around all the many things that could happen, and our brains are racing and we don't want to let go, that we do, that we acknowledge that that's part of the human experience. And it goes so far, like you buy so much with that trust, like that, they feel that. And even if it doesn't come back in terms of a thank you so much, that's rarely going to happen. but you're going to feel it in other ways. And I think that it just communicates so much to your young person when you are able to say, okay, I've communicated my concerns and we've gone over what the expectations are, and I trust you. I think that's super powerful and is ultimately very empowering for them. And they take it seriously, like, oh, I'm being trusted. Interesting. Better make some good decisions.
I think kind of circling back to the, kind of how we started and really the framework for all of it. I think when it comes to social situations, we can model. I think it's important to, if we really do think this is worth making rules about or having guidelines around. I think if we have opportunities to, it's important for us to say, this really stinks that I have to have my happy hour with my girlfriends in the lawn, 6 feet apart. It sucks. I want to give them a hug, but I can't. So we're going to put our masks on and we're going to pause for the drink and we're going to put our masks back on. And it's not ideal, but we are adapting and we're being flexible and we're socializing in different ways. And so I think that can help too, to show them how it's done, and that you're not just throwing rules at them, but that you're having to follow them too. And that and again, it sucks. This all sucks.
Yes, we cannot emphasize that enough. Yeah. Aisha, you brought up technology, and that was definitely a question that came up beforehand as well. We all know that we're all spending more time on technology. Heck, we're doing this thing on technology, whereas before the pandemic, we probably would have had a auditorium and we would have been actually able to see all of your faces, those of you who are watching tonight. So we're all having increased time and exposure to technology, and there were definitely concerns about that and about managing that came up. So I'm wondering, Aisha, do you want to expand?
Yeah, I mean, I can start with that. I think probably have some good stuff to add too. But I mean, in my practice, I am seeing, and I'm sure you are too, Lelach, just the screen time. I almost like laugh and I want to black out the question that we asked before the visits about, are you keeping your screen time to 1 to 2 hours? I mean, it's already kind of a joke on the teenager forums these days, but man, I mean, the numbers that I've seen, we're talking 8 and 9, and it's way up there. So clearly they're using it for everything. They're going to be using it for school, and they're using it for connection, and they're using it for an escape, and they're using it for comfort, and they're using it for, it's just pervasive. And so it clearly does have some good. They need it for those things these days. There aren't a lot of other ways to get those things. Every time I see them on my own kids too, every time I see them on another device, I just cringe just thinking about how much time is spent there. So I think communication in this time, I think with our children is really important, and talking to them about these serious issues and how we feel about it and how we feel mixed about it can be important. I think they listen, and like you said, they may not acknowledge it and say, thanks, you're right in the moment, but they are taking it in. So one approach I've taken in clinic is to say, I know your screen time is way up. Everybody's screen time is way up right now. But it is also really important to try and leave room for other things as well, and make sure that you're not neglecting other aspects of yourself or your family or your relationships by retreating to the screens all the time. I don't know that there's necessarily a number that I would say that people need to stick to, but I think once you start to feel or hear from others that the screen time is interfering with your ability to make real connections and with your ability to get exercise and to get sleep and all these things that are so important for coping with the stresses that we're under, and for recharging, if those things aren't able to be attained because of the screen time, then I think it's a good time to start to revise it. And I don't know how many people already use a family media contract I think this is an appropriate time to revise it if you do. I like the idea that almost like the planned socializing, you know that it's going to have to happen, screens are going to have to happen, but what guidelines do we want to use? And it kind of takes the pressure off of you as the parent saying, always having to monitor it and police it. It's just there. You blame the contract says, and we're going to have to be flexible, and we're going to have to adapt to these different times. And so that's why I'm saying it's a good time to review it, but just letting your children know that you are concerned that it can become, could become problematic, and that you want to talk about what some of the ways that you're going to keep it moderated, to kind of put that out put that out there so that you can help keep them in check. And they may need to do the same with us. I mean, my screen time is way up. My phone tells me that it is way up week by week. So I think it's just good to put it out there and say it and let them know what you're worried about, and acknowledge the good that they're getting from it, but the things that you're going to be on the lookout for when it comes to their screen usage.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you've said, and I think that I feel as though, before we were more had a more black and white outlook about this, in terms of it was more kind of like screen time is bad and putting your phone down and having non-screen time is good. And I think it's just gotten so much more complicated and nuanced than that. Because as you said, we're using, all of us right now, right? We're doing it. We're using our screens to meet so many more of our needs. We're here now, so my screen time will be up, right? Because it's after work and I'm participating with this. But on the flip side, there's a lot of good that's coming from it, right? It's good for me and hopefully for all of you, and we're engaging in this important conversation. So I think moving away from the black and white, all or nothing thinking around screen time, and moving to a more digital wellness model. A coworker and I wrote a blog recently on this idea of digital wellness, which was a new term for me, and we can send that out as a link to folks after. But getting kind of creative about how to use the screens and thinking about, are there ways in which maybe it's not like you're on the screen or you're off, but maybe you're not on social media, but you're trying out some new apps that are getting you outside and getting you to do more things that include the phone and include walking around, right? So figuring out ways in which you can kind of use the phone as something that is what's connecting us right now, and is connecting us to social and work and everything in between, and kind of mixing that in with the stuff that we want to also still see happen that we typically would think is off the screen. So figuring out like what's a more nuanced way to look at it. It's no longer really an option to have it be that if it's on the screen, it's not good. It's too many things are being facilitated through the phone to take that stance. So how can we work with the phone and just kind of think about what does it mean to have the phone and to have that screen time and have those times be up, but still be doing the things we like to do. Maybe there's more of a middle ground.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We did get a question in the Q&A, so thank you for the people who are participating in that way. It's an interesting question to me as a pediatrician. The individual is saying that their 13-year-old has aged out of their pediatrician's care, which is interesting to me because all the pediatricians that I know see folks till 18 or 21, but for whatever reason, this person has aged out of their care. And the question is, how long to wait? How long can one safely wait before taking the child in for a general checkup? I don't know, Aisha, if you want to talk about just kind of the medical world and what's being done to make things safe and accessible to families.
if there's any clarification on the aging out thing, that's I would love to hear. But I would say that actually the 13-year-old visit is one of the critical visits that I have with my patients. Today, actually, a 12-year-old who I kind of treated it like a 13-year-old visit because I could just tell by some of the responses to our questions that there needed to be some time alone. So the reason the 13-year-old visit is important is because this is typically when we will suggest that the parents give the doctor and the patient some time to talk alone and allow for while I typically encourage teens to talk to their parents about as much as they feel comfortable doing, but give them a chance to talk about their own health and practice that and become independent in that, but also a space where they can talk about things they might feel embarrassed about if they want to speak about confidentially. And so you'd be amazed how much we get out of those visits. And so especially in this time when people are having so many big emotions and there is so much anxiety kind of bubbling up to the surface and depression and just so much, that it is actually really important, I think, to still keep up with the wellness visits. If you can feel comfortable with your provider's situations. For example, at our clinic, I saw mostly checkups today because we have a separate area where we will see children who are sick with a fever or a cough or vomiting or diarrhea, any potential illness. We try to defer. I even had a patient we had to defer for a little bit because there was like a third-degree person who knew someone who had COVID and maybe had a close, let's not even risk it. So we asked them to come back another time, checking temperatures and assessing for any symptoms at the door. And I'm masked throughout the visit, but I have the patient and so are the parents. And I'm taking my mask off never. They're taking their masks off only when I need to look at their mouths, and that's really brief. And we've been doing it this way for months now, and knock on wood, it's been really successful. People are excited to be able to go out and see another human being, really up close and personal, and to talk in person with someone. And we want to make sure kids are getting all of their vaccines. We don't want to come out of this with another medical, another pandemic on our hand. We don't want the measles outbreaks, and so that's another reason it is important to keep up with their pediatric wellness care. And yeah, so far it's been really successful in that we've had no outbreaks or cases related to being in clinic with our pediatric patients. And in my clinic, there are adult patients here too, and we try to keep them completely separated in a different waiting area. So it really feels safe, and it's important. So I would encourage you to try to do it. Don't delay necessarily if you feel comfortable. And everyone's situation, this is what I say about everything. Everyone's situation is different. If you have an elderly grandparent at home or someone on, immunosuppressive therapy and it really doesn't feel comfortable to you, sure. We also offer virtual visits for things that, don't require you to be here in person. So we can do a video visit, and the behavioral health stuff is a really good thing to use virtual visits to address if they're not due for a checkup or shots. And you don't necessarily need to be here. So I hope people do feel comfortable getting that kind of care.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And I would say at my clinic, we do the same thing. And also just another stat that I know we've heard at our clinic is there have been 0 cases, not only of transmission to patients, but also no staff or physicians have gotten sick from exposures in clinic that they know of. So any staff or folks who have gotten sick, they've been able to trace to outside of clinic exposures. So really, the medical world is working really hard to make it safe for folks to come in. And I would say if you have concerns, talk to your clinic. Ask them, what are they doing? Because they probably have a really good plan in place. Another question that has come up is regarding single parents or parents who are essential workers and cannot be home with their kids 100% right now with the pandemic and with going back to school virtually. I don't know if one of you guys wants to tackle that to start that off.
I mean, my thought with that is finding ways to share the work, even if it's not in your house. And so it does mean partnering up with another family, but somehow finding ways that you're getting the support you need and your child is getting the support that he, she, or they needs. So figuring out, are there other essential workers in your neighborhood who have similar sort of safety guidelines and policies that you guys align with? Are there ways in which you guys can take turns in terms of who's home with the kids? And same thing for single parents, finding ways to create more just the sharing the responsibility. And so there's something definitely scary about that. I think we've all gotten so used to just like going into our little shells, and everything else can be feeling so terrifying. But knowing that, like we've mentioned before, there's a cost benefit to all of it, right? And so the benefit of being able to share the responsibility with someone else, and someone else who maybe can relate to the same things you're going through, and is someone else you can talk to about the challenges of that, I think is so important. So finding ways to get the support for yourself and get the support for your child, so that you're not just in this together and feeling so alone.
Yeah, and just really the other thing that comes up for me is such a hats off to all the folks who are navigating this solo, because I know how hard it is to navigate with a partner who's actively engaged. It's a lot. So go easy on yourselves, give yourself breaks.
That was such beautiful validation. First and foremost.
Lena, I'm looking at the time and we are getting close to the end. There is another question that came up that I want to throw out, and I want to make sure that we honor everyone's time and allow people to get on with their lives with those kids and partners or anyone else that they want to spend their evening with. And the question has to do with helping teenagers who are largely navigating relationships remotely, whether it be on text or social media. How do we help teenagers navigate what is really normal teen drama when it's being done from afar with perhaps not the optimal communication available to them? Lena, Aisha?
Yeah. I mean, I think that teen drama is teen drama, and it's going to shake out, whether it's through text, FaceTime, TikTok, or in person. And
probably it has been shaking out in all those realms even pre-COVID, right?
And it's been shaken out. It's going to continue to shake out. And so normalizing that it's a tough time, right? Like, we can all think back to when we were teenagers, and we probably remember it as a pretty tough time. Maybe you don't, and then then you have a really good memory. So the fact is that stuff's gonna happen, and I don't know that it's gonna be that much harder through the text, right? I guess what I'm trying to say is it's gonna happen. It's not necessarily always gonna be pretty, right? Like, those are hormones are running high, peer relationships, competition, all those things are there. And the most important thing is, whether or not it's happening face to face or over text, is that you're showing up as a supportive, role modeling parent who's there if your teen wants to run it by you, is looking for that extra support, or just looking for someone who's in the room with them and can maybe turn the TV on and distract them. There's not too much we can do in the nitty-gritty of it besides showing up as someone who loves them and supports them, and can communicate that no matter what.
And I think back to the whole media contract type of thing that you brought up, Aisha, earlier, which, by the way, if parents who are listening are not familiar with that, Google it. Google a media contract, because there's lots of really good options out there that you can look at. Often what I've seen on those is things like, do not put into a text something that you would not say face-to-face, or something along those lines. So in your basic kind of baseline conversation with your child about how do they use their phone, social media, electronics, some of that stuff can be stuff that as you're revisiting it, because it's a great time to revisit it, you can talk about. And you can talk about, hey, without body language and without tone of voice and things that you can get in real life communication, it's maybe easier to miscommunicate. It's maybe easier to have things be misconstrued. And that, I think, it's a bigger thing than just how do we navigate this teen drama. It's lessons for life in terms of how you get along with electronics and technology in our society. So,
digital well-being.
Yeah, exactly. All right, wonderful. It is actually almost 8 o'clock, and we want to allow people to go on with their lives. We thank you so much for your time and allowing us to share our experiences and what we are gleaning along the way. It is a constantly changing, we are navigating without a map. It is, when we came up with that title months ago, it's because it's the truth. The waters are shifting and moving, and we don't necessarily know what's around the corner, but hopefully the ideas of being flexible, the ideas of being able to adjust expectations as we go, knowing that we are where we are, we can't change it, so we acknowledge it, and then we kind of go, okay, now what do we do? I heard a fabulous line earlier today that we're at least this much farther in than we were in March. Who knows if we're halfway or forward, but we're at least this much farther. So we've got some of the COVID pandemic behind us. So hopefully, we can inspire you guys to keep the conversation going. There is no right way. Be kind to yourselves, be kind to your kids. And thank you all so much. Thanks, Lena. Thanks, Aisha.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good evening, everyone.
You will.
Oh, and thank GFS staff who kept this all going tonight.
Yeah.
Appreciate that too. We will also send a follow-up email with hopefully that connection to digital wellness and a survey also, so that you guys can help us know how we can make this even more useful next time. All right. Good night, everyone.
And good luck.
Yeah.
Thanks.